May it please the tribunal, the United States will continue with the presentation showing the individual responsibility of the defendant von Schirach. It will be made by Captain Sprecher.
May it please the tribunal. It is my responsibility to present the individual responsibility to the defendant Schirach for crimes against the peace, war crimes, and crimes against humanity as they concern directly a common plan or conspiracy. The prosecution contends that the defendant Schirach is guilty of having exercised a leading part in the conspiracy from the year 1925 until the Nazi downfall. The conspiratorial acts and the criminality of Schirach may be grouped for purposes of convenience into three principal phases. His early support of the conspirators over the period 1925 to 1929. Secondly, his leadership and direction of German youth over the period 1929 to 1945. And third, his leadership of the Reichsgau Vienna as chief representative of the Nazi Party and the Nazi state in Vienna for the period July 1940 to 1945. This presentation will take up each of these principal phases after a brief listing of all the principal positions which Schirach held. In presenting first this listing of positions held by Schirach, it is not intended immediately to describe the functions of each of these positions. Insofar as a description of these functions of any of these particular positions is needed still at this time in this presentation, it will be given later during a discussion of Schirach's conspiratorial acts as Nazi youth leader and as Nazi official in Vienna. For the consideration of the tribunal, we have submitted a brief on this subject. The document book contains English translations of 29 documents. Although we feel that we have reduced the number of documents to the minimum, the document book is still large. But Schirach's subversion of German youth is a large subject, even apart from any of his other acts. Now, most of these documents are from German publications, of which the tribunal can take judicial notice. Therefore, in most cases, it is intended only to paraphrase from these documents, unless your honors in particular instances will indicate that you would like fuller treatment. Now, before passing to the actual documentation, I want to express my appreciation particularly to Major Hartley Murray, to Lieutenant Fred Niebergall at my right, to Mr. Norbert Heilpern for their assistance in the research, analysis, translation, and organization of these materials. Schirach agrees that he held the following positions. They are found in two affidavits, or an affidavit and a certificate. One, an affidavit of the 4th December 1945, which is document 3302 PS, document book page 110. I want to offer that affidavit as USA Exhibit 665. The certificate, which I will only rely on for one point, is document 2973 PS. It's already in evidence as U.S. Exhibit 14. Turning first to document 3302 PS, this affidavit shows that Schirach was a member of the party from 1925 to 1945. That he was the leader of the National Socialist Student League from 1929 to 1931. That he was leader of the Hitler Youth Organization from 1931 to 1940. In 1931 and 1932, Schirach was Reich Youth Leader on the staff of the SA Supreme Command, where at that time all Nazi youth organizations were centralized. Also, Schirach was Reich Youth Leader of the NSDAP from 1931 to 1940. In 1932, Schirach became an independent Reich Leader, in the party. Upon acquiring this relatively independent position, he no longer remained on the staff of the SA Supreme Command, since Nazi youth affairs thereafter, with the creation of the Reich leadership, directly subordinate to Hitler with Schirach at the helm, we had that kind of a condition existing in the party where, under the leadership principle at the pinnacle, you had one man, Schirach, and you no longer had the youth affairs underneath the SA. However, within the SA, Schirach retained the rank and the title of a Gruppenführer throughout the period from 1931 to 1941. And in that year, 1941, he was elevated to the rank of an SA Obergruppenführer, a rank which Schirach continued to hold in the SA until the collapse. Schirach was Reich Leader of Youth Education in the NSDAP from 1932 until the collapse. In other words, from before the Nazis came to state power until the final downfall, this defendant held the high position of a Reich leader inside the party. Now, in addition to these positions in the party, Schirach held the following positions in the Nazi state. Reich Youth Leader, 1933 to 1940. Reich Governor, Reichsstatthalter of the Reichsgau Vienna, 1940 to 1945. Reich Defense Commissioner of Vienna, 1940 to 1945. Now, although Schirach gave up some of his positions with respect to the leadership of German youth in 1940, when he accepted these positions in Vienna, he still continued to hold after that time the party position of Reich Leader for Youth Education in the NSDAP. Moreover, he was given a very special position as Deputy to the Führer for the inspection of the Hitler Youth, the organization which he, of course, had led until 1940. He continued in these last two positions until the downfall. The certificate, document 2973, the only thing I rely on there in this particular presentation is to show that Schirach was a member of the Reichstag from 1932 to 1945. We next take up acts showing that Schirach actively promoted...
Captain Sprecher, you're going a little bit too fast for us to follow the document.
Yes, sir. We next take up acts showing that Schirach actively promoted the NSDAP and its affiliated youth organizations before the Nazis seized power. Schirach was an intimate and a servile follower of Hitler from the year 1925. In that year, when he was only 18 years old, Schirach joined the Nazi conspirators by becoming a member of the party. Upon special request of Hitler, he went to Munich to study party affairs. he became active in converting students to National Socialism. I'm paraphrasing there, Your Honors, from paragraph 2 of Schirach's own affidavit, 3302 P.S., found at page 1110 of the document book. Now, this was the start of conspiratorial activities, which Schirach thereafter continued for 2 decades in the spirit of unbending loyalty to Hitler and to the principles of National Socialism. Hitler's early personal attentions to this defendant bore fruit for the conspirators, and we find Schirach's stature in party circles rapidly growing through these early years. In 1929, Schirach was made national leader of the entire National Socialist German Students' League. He retained this position for 2 years until 1931. Document 3464 PS, document book page 121, is an extract from the 1936 edition of the party manual, U.S. Exhibit 666, which I would like to offer in evidence. This makes it clear that the purposes of the Nazi Student League were the ideological and political conversion of students in universities and technical schools to National Socialism. After 1931, Schirach devoted his full time to party work. Schirach was elected a Nazi member of the Reichstag in 1932, and therefore he played his part in the unparliamentary conduct of the Nazi Reichstag members during the last months of the existence of the Reichstag as an independent instrument of government. Some of the best evidence concerning Schirach's support of the conspiracy in its early stages comes from Schirach's own words in this book, The Hitler Youth. Excerpts from this book are found in document number 1458 PS, document book, page 1. It is offered in evidence as USA Exhibit 667.
Now, since this book, Your Honors, covers many years and many topics, I shall be required to refer to it occasionally later on. An example of Schirach's servile loyalty to Hitler during the early years is found at page 17 of this book, page 12 of your document book. There he writes of his early years of party activity as follows. Quote, "We were not yet able to account for our conception in detail. We simply believed. And when Hitler's book, Mein Kampf, was published, it was our Bible, which we almost learned by heart in order to answer the questions of the doubters and superior critics. Almost everyone today who is leading youth in a responsible position joined us in those years." End quote. Before 1933, Schirach moved throughout Germany, leading demonstrations and summoning German youth to membership in the Hitler Youth. When the Hitler Youth and the wearing of its uniform were forbidden by law, Schirach continued his activities by illegal means. Of this period, he himself writes at page 26 of his book on the Hitler Youth, pages 16 and 17 of your document book, as follows. Quote, "At this time, the HJ, the Hitler Jugend, gained its best human material. Whoever came to us during this illegal time, boy or girl, risked everything. With pistols in our pockets, we drove through the Ruhr district while stones came flying after us. We jumped every time we heard a bell ring
because we lived in constant fear of arrest and expected our houses to be searched. End quote. At page 27 of the same book, page 18 of your honors document books, Schirach indicates that in the early inter-party fight between Hitler and Strasser, Schirach clung steadfastly to the to the Hitler clique. And that in discussing Strasser, he exchanged his confidences only with the defendant Streicher. It is hardly necessary to argue that such an intimate of the Führer himself was advised from the beginning of the general purposes, plans, and methods of the conspiracy. As an interesting sideline, I believe one of those conferences, you will note, took place in Schirach's apartment in Munich, and that Hitler used to come there occasionally. Schirach was the leading Nazi conspirator in destroying all independent youth organizations and in building the Nazi youth movement. In connection with this point, the attention of the tribunal is invited to the brief of the U.S. Chief of Counsel entitled, quote, "The Reshaping of Education, the Training of Youth," end quote, which was written for the U.S. Chief of Counsel by Major Hartley Murray, and to the document cited therein under the section headed, quote, "B, the Nazi conspirators supplemented the school system by training youth through the Hitler Jugend," end quote. These documents were offered in evidence in document book D in the earlier phase of this trial. The attention of the tribunal is also recalled to the motion picture, The Nazi Plan, which was shown before the tribunal on the 11th of December, insofar as that film involves the defendant Schirach and his Hitler Youth organization. Occasions when Schirach's activities are shown in this film are noted in document number 3054 PS, the index and the guide to this film, which is already in evidence as U.S. Exhibit 167. It was the task of Schirach to perpetuate the Nazi regime through generations by poisoning the minds of youth with Nazi ideology and preparing youth for aggressive wars. This poison will long outlive the defendant. Indeed, one of the principal purposes of this exposure must be to bring to those German youths who survived the Nazi-created catastrophe a true picture of this man whom Nazi propaganda presented as a great youth hero. A man against whom the living breath of free criticism and the truth itself could make no answer before German youth or before the German people for more than 10 years. Again, from Schirach's own hand, in his book, The Hitler Youth, we have crystal clear evidence concerning the methods and the tactics employed by this defendant in his destruction of independent youth organizations and their incorporation into the Hitler Youth. At page 32, pages 19 and 20 of your honors document books, Schirach states that in 1933, the new cabinet ministers were too overburdened to solve the youth question by their own initiative. That therefore he, Schirach, then leader of the Hitler Youth, commissioned one of his confederates to lead 50 members of the Berlin Hitler Youth in a surprise raid on the Reich Committee of German Youth Organizations. This raid resulted in destroying the Reich Committee and in its absorption within the Hitler Youth. This raid was closely followed by a second surprise raid of like success upon the Youth Hostel Organization, page 33 of the document book, or page 33 of the Hitler Youth, found at pages 20 and 21 of the document book. Now, after these successful showings of force and terror, Schirach's star climbed higher. He was appointed youth leader of the German Reich in June 1933 in a solemn ceremony before Hitler. Concerning his next steps, Schirach writes at pages 35 and 36 of his book, page 22 of the document book, as follows. Quote, "The first thing I did was to dissolve the Greater German League. Since I headed all German youth organizations, and I had the right to decide on their leadership, I did not hesitate for a moment to take this step, which was for the Hitler Youth the elimination of an unbearable state of affairs." Schirach accomplished the dissolution and destruction of most youth organizations by orders which he issued and signed as youth leader of the German Reich. This is shown by the order contained in document number 2229 PS, your document book, page 65, which is offered in evidence as U.S. Exhibit
Mr. Sprecher,
668.
you must go more slowly, as the translation isn't coming through sufficiently quickly.
Yes, Your Honor.
If you could pause at the end of your sentences in order to let the translation come through.
Yes, sir. By this one order of Schirach, 9 youth organizations were dissolved, including the Boy Scout movement. The Protestant and Catholic youth organizations were the last to be destroyed and absorbed by the Hitler Youth. Schirach accomplished the absorption of the Protestant Youth organization by agreement with the Hitler-appointed Reich Bishop Ludwig Müller, page 38 of the Hitler Youth, page 24 of the document book. Schirach's objective in forcing all German youth into the Hitler Youth was finally accomplished in December 1936 by the Basic Law on the Hitler Youth. Document number 1392 PS is a decree 1936 Reichsgesetzblatt, Part 1, page 993, of which, of course, the tribunal may take judicial notice. This law declared in part, and Your Honors, I read from this because it shows so clearly the future cast of what was to happen and what was already happening to German youth under Schirach.
Is it set out in the book?
Yes, sir.
What page?
It's at it's document number 1392 PS. It's at page 6 of your document book. Quote, "The future of the German nation depends on its youth, and German youth shall have to be prepared for its future duties. All of the German youth in the Reich is organized within the Hitler Youth. The German youth besides being reared within the family and school, shall be educated physically, intellectually, and morally in the spirit of National Socialism to serve the people and the community through the Hitler Youth. The task of educating the German youth through the Hitler Youth is being entrusted to the Reich leader of German youth in the NSDAP. The first executive order on this basic law concerning the Hitler Youth was issued on the 25th of March, 1939. If you'll refer to page 40 of your document book. This decree, 1939, Reich Gesetzblatt, Part 1, page 709, among other points, confirms the exclusive nature of Schirach's responsibility concerning German youth. I will quote only one sentence. Quote, "The youth leader of the German Reich is solely competent for all missions of the physical, ideological, and moral education of the entire German youth outside of the house of the parents and the school."
I'm sorry. I think that you've told us enough now to satisfy us that von Schirach was in charge of the ideological education of German youth, and completely in charge of it.
Yes, sir.
And we don't desire to hear any more of it.
I understand. In exercising his far-reaching control over German youth, Schirach naturally relied upon the common techniques of the Nazi conspirators, including the leadership principle, the nature of which has already been established before this tribunal. The tribunal will find a galling glorification and explanation of the leadership principle as it applied to German youth in Schirach's book, The Hitler Youth, at page 68, translated at page 32 of the document book. I won't read from that. In his affidavit, document number 3302 PS, paragraph 5, Schirach states, quote, "It was my task to educate the youth in the aims, ideology, and directives of the NSDAP, and beyond this, to direct and to shape them." End quote. Naturally, Schirach established and directed an elaborate propaganda apparatus to accomplish a thoroughgoing poisoning of the minds of German youth. Document number 3349 PS, your document books, page 149, offered in evidence as U.S. Exhibit 666.
Page 149.
Yes, sir.
I've only got page 124.
Sorry, it's 114, the typographical error. This is an excerpt from pages 452 and 453 of the 1936 edition of the party manual. This document will show that the Reich Youth Leadership, Reichsjugendführung, of the NSDAP prepared and published numerous periodicals ranging from a daily press to monthly magazines. This document also shows that the propaganda office of the Hitler Youth maintained, through liaison agents, a political and ideological connection with the propaganda office of the NSDAP and with the propaganda ministry, both of which, of course, were headed by the conspirator Goebbels. Schirach shares with the conspirator Dr. Robert Lai, Reich Organisationsleiter of the NSDAP, the responsibility for the establishment and general administration of the Adolf Hitler schools. This is shown by a joint statement of Lai and Schirach in the year 1937. This is found in document book at page 100. It is our document 2653 PS, offered in evidence as USA Exhibit 669. This document shows that these Adolf Hitler schools were open free of charge to outstanding and proven members of the young folk, the junior section of the Hitler Youth Organization. It further shows that the object of these schools was the building of youthful leadership for the Nazi Party and the Nazi state apparatus. Schirach extended his education of German youth into the field of law and the legal profession, even though these fields were principally under the control of the defendant Frank. Proof is found in document number 3459 PS, page 120 of the document book. This is a one-page extract from an account of the Congress of German Law in 1939. It is offered as U.S. Exhibit 670. This document shows that beyond purely technical education in law, it was considered by the conspirators to be the task of the party to exercise influence upon the ideological conceptions of the Young Law Guardians League. This league was a junior organization of the National Socialist Law Guardians League, a Nazi-controlled organization of lawyers. Now, at this Congress, to which the document refers, an official of the Young Law Guardians League declared that ignorance of the simplest legal principles could best be fought within the Hitler Youth, and that therefore the legal education program of the Hitler Youth was to receive the broadest support. Obergebietsführer Arthur Oxman, the subordinate of Schirach at that time, and who in 1940 was to succeed him as leader of the Hitler Youth, was at that time, namely May 1939, appointed the chairman of a youth legal committee for the establishment of the youth law. He was appointed by the defendant Frank.
But, Captain Sprecher, I don't think I made it quite clear to you that the tribunal is not really interested in these details by which the defendant von Schirach acquired his power over the German youth. You've told us sufficient to establish in our minds, so far at any rate, that he managed to get absolute command over the German youth. And the only thing that seems to me to be material at the present stage is whether or not you can show us any direct evidence that the defendant von Schirach was a party to the aggressive aims of the Reich leaders, or to any war crimes, or to any crimes against humanity. Unless you can show us that, your address to us is really not useful at this stage.
I plan to take up directly, Your Honors, the question of the militarization of youth. I did want to make one reference to the relation of the Hitler Youth to the League for Germandom Abroad at this point, if that is satisfactory to Your Honors.
A League for Germandom Abroad?
Yes, sir.
Oh, yes, well, that may bear upon the aggressive aims of the Reich leaders.
Schirach extended the influence of the Hitler Youth beyond the borders of Germany by means of cooperation between the Hitler Youth and the German League for Germandom Abroad, the VDA. This is proven by an agreement made in 1933 between Schirach and leaders of the VDA, which is contained in document number L360H, document book, page 3. This is offered in evidence as U.S. Exhibit 671. Now, Schirach discusses in his book, The Hitler Youth, under the chapter heading, quote, Work Abroad, end quote. That's chapter 4 of the book, pages 34 to 38 of the document book, some of the connections of the Hitler Youth as an ideological weapon in connection with such of the Nazi ideas as Lebensraum, colonial policy. I won't read from that, since it also covers to a certain extent, Your Honor.
Does it talk about Lebensraum?
I beg your pardon?
Does it speak of Lebensraum?
It uses the actual word Lebensraum, yes.
Page 3 of it.
At page 36 of the document book, there is reference made to the Ostraum, space in the east.
I thought you told us the document you were dealing with was L360H on page 3.
Oh, I'm sorry, Your Honor. I had gone on from there to speak about Schirach's book.
Oh.
Document 1458 PS.
Very well.
And I had mentioned that at pages 34 to 38 of that book, there were references concerning the Nazi ideas of colonial policy and Lebensraum, and that this book by Schirach indicated that the Hitler Youth was
Page
used as an
36,
instrument
you say?
for spreading those ideas.
Page 36?
That's page 36 of the document book, yes. He uses the word Ostraum in speaking of space in the East, and he discusses German youth organizations abroad and the German schools in these countries. And then I wish particularly to point out on page 37 the following sentence, since you have asked about this. Quote, it's near the bottom of the page 37. the typewritten page 24 of the original document, if that helps, Your Honor.
In our book, it's 24 or 37?
It's page 37 of the document book, which is numbered consecutively from 1 all the way through. But it's page 24 of this particular document, 1458, in the English translation. Quote, "It will be taken into consideration concerning this schooling that the guiding line of German population policy, which aims at the utilization of the space in the East, will not be violated." Now, Your Honors, in concluding the question of the ideological significance of the Hitler Youth, I would like to ask your indulgence while I make a short quotation from that master Nazi ideologist, Alfred Rosenberg. This is document 130 PS, your document book, page 122, which is offered as U.S. Exhibit 672. Rosenberg was making an answer to some inquiries of the defendant Bormann about the expediency of initiating some legal proceedings against the churches in 1939. Rosenberg replied, apparently in closing article which he had written the year before, and it is from this article which I wish to quote. Quote, "We have made quite some progress in carrying the National Socialist ideology to German youth."
Wait a minute. It's page 122 and 123.
Page 123 the quote is from 123. The document begins at page 122. It's all underlined in red. "We have made quite some progress in carrying the National Socialist ideology to German youth. What there is still left of Catholic youth are only small groups which will be absorbed as time goes on. The Hitler Youth is the absorbing sponge which nobody can resist. Furthermore, our program for education in all categories of our school has been built up already with such an anti-Christian and anti-Jewish tendency that the generation growing up now will be safe from the black swindle." End quote. I use that extract, Your Honors, in connection with the expectancy of these conspirators themselves with respect to the Hitler Youth and what it was to do to the minds of young Germans. Now, the conspirators devoted a great deal of energy to the perpetuation of their scheme of things by developing specially selected and specially trained successors for Nazi leadership, and in acquiring active Nazis for the rank and file of the NSDAP and its affiliated organizations, including the SA and the SS, which are alleged here to be criminal organizations. A number of orders issued by the party chancellery under the heading Successor Problems show the dominant part assumed by Schirach and the Hitler Youth in this field. Our document number 3348 PS is a selection from the Verfügungen, Anordnungen, and Bekanntgaben, the decrees, regulations, and announcements of the party chancellery, which has already been marked in evidence as U.S. Exhibit 410. Now, these contain some of the orders which I won't take your time take the time to read. But they're all contained on one page, page 113 of your document book.
113?
Yes. Only Hitler Youth members who distinguished themselves were to be admitted to the party. Nazi leaders were directed to absorb full-time Hitler Youth leaders into their staffs so as to give them some practical experience and thus secure necessary successors for the leadership corps, which is also alleged as a criminal organization. The pivotal and central functions of the Hitler Youth in the domination of German life by the party is also shown at page 80 and 81 of the 1938 Party Manual. That's already in evidence as U.S. Exhibit 430, and it's found at page 74 of the document book.
I mean, it's simply the organization of the youth, nothing to do with any criminal aims.
Your Honor, it is certainly the contention of the prosecution that any man who took an active part in furnishing for these criminal organizations young members is guilty of crime.
I quite understand that. And that is why I told you that we were satisfied that so far you had shown, subject of course to what the defendant von Schirach may be able to show, that he had acquired and was the leader of the German youth. And that the only thing that we want to hear about at this stage is whether he was a party to the schemes for aggressive war, to war crimes, or to crimes against humanity. That is what we want to hear, and we don't want to hear anything else.
Your Honors, may I pass then to the connection of the Hitler Youth to the SS. Document number 2396 PS, which is found at page 69 of the document book. Which is offered as USA Exhibit 673, has a quotation in it concerning the Streifendienst of the Hitler Youth, the Streifendienst being the patrol service, a type of self-police organization of the Hitler Youth. And the quotation which I had intended to read will indicate how this organization became the principal supplier of the SS. Are Your Honors interested in having me read that quotation concerning the Hitler Youth as the main source of the SS?
Yes, perhaps. I haven't read it.
This document is an agreement between Schirach and Himmler. It was concluded in October 1938. It bears, I think, partial quoting. Organization of the Streifendienst. 1. Since the Streifendienst in the Hitler Youth has to perform tasks similar to those of the SS for the whole movement, it is organized as a special unit for the purpose of securing recruits for the general SS. However, as much as possible, recruits for the SS special troops, for the SS death head units, for the officer candidate schools should be taken from these formations. The selection of Streifendienst, I'm skipping down to 4A there, the second part which is underlined in red in your book. The selection of Streifendienst members is made according to the principles of racial selection of the Schutzstaffel. The competent officials of the SS, primarily unit leaders, race authorities, and SS physicians, will be consulted for the admission test. Skipping to 5. To ensure from the beginning a good understanding between Reich Youth leadership and Reich SS leadership, a liaison office will be ordered from the Reich Youth leadership to the SS main office starting 1 October 1938. The appointment of other leaders to the SS sections is a subject for future agreement. Then, going down to what I think is the most striking quotation, Your Honors, 6. After the organization is completed, the SS takes its replacement primarily from the Streifendienst members. Admission of youth of German blood who are not members of the Hitler Youth is then possible only after information and advice of the competent Bahn leader. End quote. Now, the Bahn leader there, referred to there, was the local leader of the Hitler Jugend. And without his consent, no one could go into the SS in the future after that agreement was made, which was in October 1938. Now, the second agreement which Schirach made with Himmler was made in December 1938. It is found in our document book, number 2567, page 98 of the document book. It is offered in evidence as USA Exhibit 674. It states that the farm service of the Hitler Youth, quote, is according to education and aim, comma, particularly well suited as a recruiting agency for the SS, General SS, and the armed section of the SS, SS Special Troops, and SS Death Head battalions, end quote. The agreement concludes by stating that farm service members of the Hitler Youth who pass the SS admission test will be taken over by the SS immediately after leaving the Hitler Youth farm service. I might point out to your honors that this meant that after that time, any Hitler Youth member who was in the farm service was obliged to go into the SS. I now come directly to the point you have been inquiring about, Your Honor. Throughout the 6 years of Nazi political control over Germany before the launching of aggressive wars, Schirach was actively engaged in militarizing German youth. From the beginning, the Hitler Youth was set up along military lines with uniforms, ranks, and titles. It was regimented and led in military fashion under the leadership principle. If your honors will take any edition whatsoever of the organization book, the party manual, and turn to the tables, beginning with table 54, and leaf through the book, you will see the very striking insignia of the Hitler Youth and how much it compares to what the normal military insignia. You will further notice that One of the most prominent insignia is an S of the same type that the Germans use, or that the Nazis use, with respect to the SS. You will notice that a part of the uniform was a long knife.
Isn't that all a part of what they're pleased to call the Nazi ideology? I mean,
Well,
the Führership principle,
Sir, I'm trying...
military training.
Well, there's a relation between all of these things, perhaps, and the leadership principle, because the leadership principle dominated absolutely every aspect of German life. However, Your Honors, I suggest that showing to you this graphic, in this graphic means the similarity between the uniforms of the Hitler Youth and military uniforms has some bearing upon the preparation for aggressive wars, about which I am further to speak in just a moment. Now, document 2654, PS, found at page 162 of your document books.
One what?
102. Is a whole book given over to just this question of the organization and the insignia of the Hitler Youth. The tribunal will see how the Hitler Youth was divided into branches or divisions, which were very similar to military divisions. That document is offered as USA Exhibit 675. Now, in a speech in February 1938, when the conspirators had already dropped some of the camouflage which surrounded their earlier military preparations for the wars which we have recently suffered, Hitler discussed the military training of the Hitler Youth in the Völkische Beobachter of the 21st of February, 1938. This is our document 2454 PS, found at page 97 of the document book. It is offered as USA Exhibit 676. Hitler there said that thousands of German boys had received specialized training through the Hitler Youth in naval, aviation, and motorized groups, and that over 7,000 instructors had trained more than 1 million Hitler Youth members in rifle shooting. This was February 1938. Shortly before the Anschluss, note the progress of military training within the Hitler Youth between then and August 1939, just 1 month before the invasion of Poland. At that time, the defendant Schirach and the defendant Keitel, as chief of the High Command, entered into another one of those very informative agreements, which many of these defendants like to make among themselves. It is document number 2398 BS. Your document books, page 72. It is offered as USA Exhibit 677. It is taken from Das Archiv, which, in introducing the actual agreement, declared that this agreement was, quote, the result of close cooperation, end quote, between Schirach and Keitel. The agreement itself states in part, quote, while it is exclusively the task of the Hitler Youth to attend to the training of their units in this direction, it is suitable in the sense of a uniform training corresponding to the demands of the Wehrmacht to support the leadership of the Hitler Youth for their responsible task as trainers and educators in all fields of training for defense by special courses. And then skipping down towards the end, you will note this quotation within the agreement: a great number of courses are in progress. Your Honor, if I may take about 5 minutes, I can finish this one section on the aggressive war phase.
Very well.
Whereas Hitler in February 1938 mentioned that 7,000 Hitler Youth leaders were engaged in training German youngsters in rifle shooting, Schirach and Keitel, in their agreement of August 1939, note the following, quote, 30,000 Hitler Youth leaders are already being trained annually in field service. The agreement with the Wehrmacht gives the possibility of roughly doubling that number. The billeting and messing of the Hitler Youth leaders is done according to the regulations for execution already published in the barracks, drill grounds, etc. of the Wehrmacht at a daily cost of 25 pfennig, end quote. Just as Schirach dealt with the head of the SS in obtaining zealous recruits for organized banditry and the commission of atrocities, so also he dealt with the head of the Wehrmacht in furnishing young men as human grist for the mill of aggressive war. The training of German youth runs through the Nazi conspiracy as an important central thread. It is one of the manifestations of Nazism which has shocked the entire civilized world. The principal responsibility for the planning and execution of the Nazi youth policy falls upon this defendant. I wish to take merely one sentence from his own affidavit, paragraph 5, document number 3302PS, so that there can be no doubt before this tribunal, or before the world indeed, as to this defendant's own feelings of responsibility. Quote, I feel myself responsible for the policy of the youth movement in the party and later within the Reich. End quote. I underline the phrase, I feel myself responsible. Your Honor, that's a convenient breaking point before coming to a discussion of Schirach's connection to war crimes and crimes against humanity. May it please the Tribunal. I now pass to activities which involve Schirach in the commission of crimes against humanity as they bear directly on count 1. Our presentation of specific acts will deal with the Reichsgau Vienna. But first allow me to refer back to two important points in the previous proof which will show that Schirach bears responsibility for war crimes and crimes against humanity which bring in the whole of Europe. Through his agreements with Himmler, he provided through the Hitler Youth many, if not most, of the SS men who administered, in the main, the concentration camps, and whose war crimes and whose crimes against humanity throughout all Europe are notorious. Nor should we pass, if Your Honors please, to the specific acts without mentioning one more thing. that Schirach cannot escape responsibility for implanting in youth the Nazi ideology generally, with its tenets of a master race, subhuman peoples, and Lebensraum and world domination. For it is plain that such notions were the psychological prerequisites for the instigation and for the toleration of the atrocities which zealous Nazis committed throughout Germany and the occupied territory. To present Schirach's responsibilities for crimes committed within the Reichsgau Vienna, where you will recall Schirach was Gau leader and Reichsgovernor from July 1940 until the downfall, the general basic functions of these two offices must be held in mind. The first document I refer to is document number 1893 PS. This is an extract from the party manual of 1943, and therefore catches Schirach in midstream in his activities in the Reichsgau Vienna. That's page 42 of the document book. At pages 70, 71, 75, 98, 136, and 140B of the party manual, extracts from each of those pages appearing in your document books, the following highlights concerning the Gau leader's functions will appear. And I propose only to paraphrase. Since your honors may take judicial notice of the party manual, you may check at your leisure, unless you wish me to read from any one of these specific orders. These orders make it appear that the Gau leader was the highest representative, of course, of Hitler and his Gau, that he was the bearer of sovereignty, the top Hoheitsträger in his Gau, and that he had sovereign political rights. Beyond that, he was responsible for the entire political situation in his Gau. He could call, and we believe this is important, he could call upon SA and SS leaders as, quote, needed in the execution of a political mission, end quote. Beyond that, he was obliged to meet at least once a month with the leaders of the affiliated party organizations within his Gau. And this, of course, will include the SS. Now, the position of the Reich governor in Vienna is somewhat special. After the Anschluss, the state of Austria was abolished, and Austria was divided into 7 Reichsgaus. The most important of these Gaus was the Reichsgau Vienna, of which Schirach was governor. Reference to any statistical manual of the Reich at this time will establish that at that time Vienna had a population of over 2 million people. Therefore, it was certainly one of the principal cities of the Reich. The tribunal is asked to take judicial notice of the decree 1939, Reichsgesetzblatt, Part 1, page 777. That's our document number 3301, found at page 107 of the document book. This is the basic law on the administrative reorganization of Austria. It was enacted in April 1939, a little more than a year before Schirach became governor. This law shows that Schirach, as governor, was the lieutenant of the head of the German state, Hitler, that he could issue decrees and orders within the limitations set by the Supreme Reich authorities, that he was specially under the administrative supervision of the defendant Frisch, Reich Minister of the Interior, and that he was also the first mayor of the city of Vienna. Now, for the same period that Schirach was Gau leader and Reich governor of Vienna, he was also Reich Defense Commissioner of Vienna, and after 1940, of course, the Reich was engaged in war. Because of his far-reaching responsibilities and authorities in these positions, the prosecution contends that Schirach must be held guilty specifically of all the crimes of the Nazi conspirators in the Reichsgau Vienna on the ground that he either initiated, approved, executed, or abetted these crimes. Specific examples follow, which in fact demonstrate that Schirach was actively and personally engaged in Nazi crimes, and that when he became boastful, a characteristic never lacking in most of these defendants, he himself admitted his own involvement in acts which are crimes within the competence of this tribunal. I come first to slave labor. The slave labor program naturally played its part in staffing the industries of as large and important a city as Vienna. The general nature of this program and the crimes flowing therefrom has in part been set before you already by Mr. Dodd. Soviet prosecution will present further acts later on. Our document number 3352 PS, found at page 116 of your document books, which I would like to offer as U.S. Exhibit 206, gives extracts from a number of orders of the party chancellery. Each of these orders, from which the extracts have been taken, bear on the Gau leader's responsibility for manpower placement and utilization. They prove, quite simply, and in unmistakable language, that the Gau leaders, under the direction of the experienced old Gau leader Saukel, who was then plenipotentiary of manpower, that under Saukel, these Gau leaders became the supreme integrating and coordinating agents of the Nazi conspirators in the entire manpower program. Page 116 of your document books, page 508 of the original volume of orders, which I may say is also indicated. At each place there is a quotation. The defendant Goering is shown to have agreed, as leader of the 4-year plan, to Saukel's suggestion that the Gau leaders be utilized to assure the highest efficiency in manpower. At page 117 of your document book, page 511 of the order of the party chancellery, Saukel in July 1942 makes the Gau leaders his special plenipotentiaries on manpower within their Gaus, with a duty of establishing a harmonious cooperation of all interests concerned. In effect, the Gau leader became the supreme arbitrator for all the conflicting interests that exist during wartime with respect to claims upon manpower. Under this same order, the provisional labor offices and their entire staffs were, quote, directed to be at the disposal of the Gau leaders for information and advice, and to fulfill the suggestions and demands of the Gau leader for the purpose of improvements in manpower, end quote. At pages 118 and 119 of your document book, page 567 of the party chancellery orders, the defendant Saukel ordered that his special plenipotentiaries, the Gau leaders, familiarize themselves with the general regulations on Eastern workers. He stated that his immediate objective was, quote, to avoid that politically inept factory heads.
Where is this?
That's at page 118 and 119.
Yes, but when you're quoting, you might draw our attention to part of the page.
It's over on the next page, 1119, Your Honor.
Very well. Go on.
Toward the end of the quotation. Toward the end of the entire document. His immediate objective was, quote, to avoid that politically inept factory heads give too much consideration to the care of Eastern workers and thereby cause justified annoyance among the German workers, end quote. We submit to the tribunal that if Schirach, as Gau leader, was required to concern himself in such manpower details as concern over the alleged annoyance of German workers for the consideration given Eastern workers, it is unnecessary to press further into the detailed workings of the manpower program to establish Schirach's connections and responsibility to the slave labor program in the Reichsgau, Vienna. I now pass to the persecution of the churches. The elimination of the religious youth organizations, while Schirach was chief Nazi youth leader, has already been noted. In March 1941, two letters, one from the defendant Bormann, the other from the conspirator Hans Lammers.
Captain Sprecher, have you any other evidence which connects von Schirach with the problem of manpower?
I had planned on presenting nothing further, Your Honor. I felt, in view of the fact that our Soviet colleagues are going further with the details of the manpower program, particularly in the East, the main objective under count one should merely be to show the general responsibility of the defendant Schirach for the slave labor program, and the question of specific acts will have to be inferred from the other proof that's in the record and which will come into the record later.
Very well.
Now, the tribunal is referred to document R-146 at page 5 of the document book. This is offered as U.S. Exhibit 678. I'm a little in doubt, Your Honor, as to whether I should read all of this document in view of our common anxiousness to pass rapidly on. But perhaps I may paraphrase it, and if you are not satisfied, we will read it. These documents establish clearly that during a visit by Hitler to Vienna, Schirach and 2 other officials raised with the Führer a complaint that the confiscations of church property in Austria, made on various pretexts, should be made in favor of the Gauls rather than of the Reich. And later that the Führer decided the issue in favor of the position which had been taken by Schirach, namely in favor of the Gauls. I use this merely to connect Schirach up to the persecution of the churches concerning which there has been a great deal of evidence before this time.
None of it's in evidence yet. You haven't put anything in evidence. You can't take judicial notice of something unless you ask it to us.
And your ruling is that this would not be in evidence unless I read it?
I'm not making any ruling. I was pointing out to you that we have nothing in evidence from the last document.
I think under these circumstances I had better read this document. Munich, the 20th of March, 1941. The Brown House. Circular letter number 5G. To all Gau leaders. Subject matter: sequestration of church properties. Valuable church properties had to be sequestered to a large extent lately, especially in Austria. According to reports of the Gauleiter to the Führer, these sequestrations were frequently caused by offenses against ordinances relating to war economy. Parenthesis, namely, hoarding of foodstuffs of various kinds, textiles, leather goods, etc. End parenthesis. In other cases, they were caused by offenses against the law relating to malicious attacks against the state, and in some cases because of prohibited possession of firearms. Obviously, no compensation is to be paid to the churches for sequestrations made because of the above-mentioned reasons. With regard to further sequestrations, several Austrian Gauleiter have attempted to clarify the question: who should acquire such sequestered properties at the occasion of the Führer's last visit to Vienna? Please take note of the Führer's decision as contained in the letter written by Reich Minister Dr. Lammers to the Reich Minister for the Interior, dated 14 March 1941. I enclose a copy of extracts of the same, signed M, meaning Martin Bormann. Well, I had offered that document as U.S. Exhibit 678. Do you still wish me to read the enclosure that went with it?
I don't wish you to read anything. I was simply pointing out that when you read it, it was not in evidence.
In that event, I'll continue, Your Honors. The copy reads as follows. Berlin, 14 March 1941. The Reich Minister and Chief of the Reichschancellery. To the Reich Minister for the Interior. Subject, draft of an ordinance supplementing the provisions on confiscation of property inimical to people and state. The Reich governors and Gauleiter von Schirach, Dr. Jury, and Eigruber complained recently to the Führer that the Reich Minister of Finance still maintains the point of view that confiscation of property inimical to the people and state should be made in favor of the Reich and not in favor of the Reich Gau. As a consequence, the Führer has informed me that he desires the confiscation of such properties to be effected in favor of the respective Reich Gau, in which area the confiscated property is situated, and not in favor of the Reich.
You needn't read any more of it.
Pass over now to the Jewish persecution. Prosecution submits, finally, that Schirach authorized, directed, and participated in anti-Semitic measures. Of course, the whole ideology and teaching of the Hitler Youth was predicated upon the Nazi racial myth. Before the war, Schirach addressed a meeting of the National Socialist German Students' League, the organization he headed from 1929 to 1931. Document 2441, which is offered as U.S. Exhibit 679, is an affidavit by Gregor Siemer. I wish to read merely from the bottom of page 95 of the document book and to the end of the first paragraph at the top of page 96 of the document book. The affiant Zimmer is referring to a meeting at Heidelberg, Germany, which he attended sometime before the war, personally, at which Walter von Schirach addressed the Students' League, which he at one time had himself led. Quote,
What is this document?
this is document 24.
I know.
41
But
DS.
what sort of a document is it?
It's an affidavit of,
Yes, very well.
of Gregor Siemer. He, meaning Schirach, declared that the most important phase of German university life in the Third Reich was the program of the NSDStB. He extolled various activities of the Bund. He reminded the boys of the service they had rendered during the Jewish purge. Dramatically, he pointed across the river to the old university town of Heidelberg, where several burnt-out synagogues were mute witnesses of the efficiency of Heidelberg students. These skeleton buildings would remain there for centuries as inspiration for future students, as warning to enemies of the state. End quote. But to attempt to visualize the true extent of the fiendish treatment of Jews under Schirach, we must look to his activities in the Reichsgau Vienna, to the activities of his assistants and the SS and the Gestapo in Vienna. Document number 1948, page 63 of your document book, which is offered as U.S. Exhibit 680, you will note is on the stationery
Captain
of the Reich
Sprecher.
Governor of Vienna.
Captain Sprecher, I've been reading on in this document, 2441 PS, on page 22. It seems to me you ought to read the next 3 paragraphs. Page, page 96 in red. From the place where you left off.
Yes, sir.
Second, third, and fourth paragraphs.
Quote, even as old Heidelberg Castle was evidence that old Germany had been too weak to resist the invading Frenchmen who destroyed it, so the black remains of the synagogue would be a perpetual monument reminding the coming generations of the strength of new Germany. He reminded the students that there were still countries who squandered their time and energy with books and wasteful discussions about abstract topics of philosophy and metaphysics. Those days were over. New Germany was a land of action. The other countries were sound asleep. But he was in favor of letting them sleep. The more soundly they slumbered, the better opportunity for the men of the Third Reich to prepare for more action. The day would come when German students of Heidelberg would take their places side by side with legions of other students to conquer the world for the ideology of Nazism. End quote. I was about to refer, Your Honors, to the document number 1948 PS, which is found at page 63 of your document book, and which I offer as U.S. Exhibit 680. This is, you will note, is on the stationery of the Reich Governor in Vienna, Reichsstatthalter. Vienna, the 7th of November, 1940. Subject, compulsory labor of able-bodied Jews. Paragraph 1. Notice. On 5 November 1940, telephone conversation with Colonel Standartenführer Huber of the Gestapo. Period. The Gestapo has received directions from the Reich Security Main Office, RSHA, as to how able-bodied Jews should be drafted for compulsory labor service. Investigations are being made at present by the Gestapo to find how many able-bodied Jews are still available in order to make plans for the contemplated mass projects. It is assumed that there are not many more Jews available. If some should still be available, however, the Gestapo has no scruples to use the Jews even for the removal of the destroyed synagogues. SS Colonel Huber will report personally to the, quote, Regierungspräsident, end quote, in this matter. I have reported to the Regierungspresident accordingly. The matter should be kept further in mind. End quote. The signature is from Dr. Fischer. I want to call the court's attention to the significance of the title Regierungspresident. The SS colonel, you will note, was to report to the Regierungspresident. If you will refer back again to the decree which set up the Reichsgau Vienna, 1939 Reichsgesetzblatt, Part 1, page 777. You will find that the Regierungspresident was Schirach's personal representative within the governmental administration of Vienna. Now, it seems to us that this document, number 1948, which was signed by Fischer concerning compulsory labor of able-bodied Jews, answers the argument that persons of the rank of Gauleiter were ignorant of the atrocities of the Gestapo and the SS in their own locality. Shows further that even the assistants of the Gau leaders were informed of the details of the persecution projects which were afoot at the time. Schirach also had concern for and knowledge of the housing shortage in Vienna, which was alleviated for some members of the alleged master race who succeeded to the houses of the luckless Jews who were moved into the oblivion of Poland. On December 3rd, 1940, the conspirator Lammers wrote a letter to Schirach. It's our document 1950 PS, page 64 of your document books. It is offered in evidence as U.S. Exhibit 681. The letter is very short. Berlin, 3 December 1940. It's on the stationery of the Reich Minister and Chief of the Reich Chancellery. It's marked secret. Quote, to the Reich Governor in Vienna, Gauleiter von Schirach. Quote, as Reichsleiter Bormann informs me, the Führer has decided, after receipt of one of the reports made by you, that the 60,000 Jews still residing in the Reichsgau Vienna will be deported most rapidly. That is still during the war, to the general government because of the housing shortage prevalent in Vienna. I have informed the Governor General in Krakow, as well as Reichsführer SS, about this decision of the Führer. And I request you also to take cognizance of it. Signed, Lammers. As a last piece of illustrative evidence against this youngest member of the defendants in the dock, I take something from his own lips, which was published for all Vienna, and indeed for all Germany and the world to know, even at that time. It appears in the Vienna edition of the Völkische Beobachter on the 15th of September 1942, document 3048 PS. Your document books, page 106. It is already in evidence as U.S. Exhibit 274. Would like to point out that these words were uttered before the so-called European Youth League in Vienna in 1942. the tribunal will recall that Schirach was still Reich leader for youth education in the NSDAP at that time. Quote, "Every Jew who exerts influence in Europe is a danger to European culture. If anyone reproaches me with having driven from this city, which was once the European metropolis of Jewry, tens of thousands upon tens of thousands of Jews into the ghetto of the East, I feel myself compelled to reply, I see in this an action contributing to European culture." Although Schirach's principal assistance to the conspiracy was made in his commission of the German youth to the conspirators' objectives, he also stands guilty of heinous crimes against humanity as a party and governmental administrator of high standing after the conspiracy had reached its inevitable involvement in wars of aggression. This completes, Your Honors, the presentation on the individual responsibility of the defendant Schirach.